Hello and welcome to the Larger Than Necessary First Player Token podcast. This is episode 117. My name is Chris.
I'm David.
I'm Pawel.
Hey, Pawel's here.
He's back.
What? Wow, I'm back.
We taunted everybody by saying that you were never going to be back on.
That's never happening. Never, never. What?
So,
Is it like triple negation now?
How are things at work, Pawel?
I'm never coming back.
But you've managed to take some time out on this Friday evening at like 10 to 9 at night to stop working for a little bit.
I have a 17-page long form I need to fill in before midnight, so we better hurry.
But seriously, what's that for?
I'm afraid it's confidential.
Oh, it's confidential. Okay, well, you can tell us.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
No one will hear it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think we were right there.
Well, we have wasted quite a bit of time tonight, though, by talking about classics like Barbarian.
I know.
Yes, thank you very much for introducing me to the wolf. My life is now quite
Wolf
changed.
From Gladiators. This 1987 game, we had a pretty lengthy chat about that. It was pretty good.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with what we're going to talk about in the episode, though.
I almost got jealous of your childhoods there.
Oh, there's a Barbarian too, Dave.
Yeah. I know.
When did that come out? 1988. Oof, they didn't hang about, did they?
Not in those days.
Just people making things in their attic. That's how games were made back then. Anyway, we are here to talk about video games this week. We've got a packed programme.
Indeed.
And Dave, you teased us with a little game a few weeks ago, said you were going to talk about it. Are you going to do that?
Yeah. I'd better,
okay, go on then.
As we've agreed. That's what I'm going to do.
Dave, we have to pretend that we don't know what we're going to do. Like, add a little bit of mystery into the episodes.
It's like, why are you asking me these questions? It's like, I discussed this like 15 minutes ago.
I do apologise. All right, let's stop with this nonsense. Tell us about the return of the Obra Dinn, please, Dave.
Right, so the game I did mention that I have been playing is Return of the Obra Dinn, which is a game by a guy called Lucas Pope, who people may know as the person behind Papers, Please.
Oh, yeah. What a game.
A very well-received indie game.
Very depressing.
Yes, and a game with a sort of unique approach to storytelling, I suppose, is one way you could describe it. And there's some similar things going on in the Return of the Obra Dinn, but a very, very different game, as you'll find out. The Obra Dinn in question is a ship, a sailing ship with sort of a tall ship, tall-masted one, and in the story, because it is very much a kind of story-based game, the Obra Dinn has set sail from England at the start of the 19th century, I'm going to say, if I recall correctly. It set sail from Falmouth Harbour for the Orient, but it never arrives, and it never even makes it around the Cape of Good Hope. So it's just lost at sea. But then, a year later, washes up, or kind of sails up to Falmouth Harbour.
It just sails itself up there.
Well, the thing is, it's now a ghost ship. There is not a soul alive on board. And what you do in this game, you are a sort of insurance assessor, I guess, for the British East India Company. And your task is to go on board the Obra Dinn and figure out exactly what has happened to the ship and to all of the people on board. And that specifically is your task, is to discover the fates of all, it's like 60 or so souls who were on board the Obra Dinn and who have since, disappeared, or fate unknown. Right, I should say, like, this is a puzzle game. It's quite a short game, and I just want to I'm not going to give any spoilers about any of the solutions about the puzzles, but I will say that if you do want to play this game, it is probably best played sight unseen, given its sort of relative brevity. And I will be talking about stuff, some of which when I found it in the game, I was like, oh, it's quite neat. So, it's a sort of mild, they're not even mild spoilers, I don't know how else to describe it, but it's a sort of fair warning. I will talk about, like, in detail some of the stuff that happens at the start of the game. The way it begins, you're basically ferried out to the ship by a very grumpy ferryman. And you climb up on board onto the deck, and there's not a soul to be seen. You sort of have a little bit of a wander around. There's, like, the doors are all locked. You can't get below the deck. And the only thing you can really find is some sort of, like, skeletal remains that are on the deck there. I should say, before you even notice that, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, the first thing you're going to notice when you play the game is the graphics engine. Totally should have mentioned that first. It's very distinctive.
Yeah, it's a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big part of it. And if you look at screenshots, you'll immediately say what I mean. You probably shouldn't look at screenshots, because I had a quick look at them before I came on, and loads of them have spoilers about the story. So sort of squint your eyes a little bit, or maybe, yeah. Like, I've noticed even on Steam, sometimes the Steam screenshots have kind of spoilers in them. They're not, like, curated very well. Anyway, it's hard. It's a sort of retro style. I mean, Wikipedia says that it's based on early games on the Mac. I'll have to take its word for that. But it's monochrome graphics. It's kind of like vector graphics, but not really, because there's, like, shadows, like dynamic shadows, and lots of modern features, but with a retro look. And there's sort of, like, dithering for the textures. Like, if you look at the sun, it's a sort of weird, like, dithered, if you know what that is, or, like, sort of stippled dots. Quite a unique look. If you're a nerd like me, you'll probably already been into the options setting before you even started the game, and you'll have discovered that you can switch the sort of color scheme to a number of other sort of fictitious retro computers. It gives them, I can't even remember the names. I'm just going to make one up. It'll be like, it'll be like referencing. It'll be like the IntelliScope, and it'll be like 1080 to sort of reference the fact that it's, like, retro, but it's also high resolution.
They did something similar to that in Downwell. Have you ever played Downwell?
No,
they did something similar to that, because it's very, very simple graphics, and it's like a ZX Spectrum game, basically. But yeah, it has the same thing where you can change the colour palette to these fictitious colour palettes.
Yeah.
But just basically, because the game's in two colours, it's just basically choosing two different colours.
Yeah, and all the alternate ones in Obra Dinn are horrible anyway, and you should stick with the matte colours, because they're by far the best. All the rest made my head hurt. But I mean, it's a 3D first person game, in which you're solving puzzles, which is it's slightly weird. But so you're kind of you explore a little bit on the deck, like I was saying, and then the ferryman calls out to you, and he's like, "Come down and get this box that you brought with me. I can't be bothered hauling it up into the deck for you." And you go down and grab it, and inside it is two items. The first thing, well, one of the things you get is a little, like, pocket watch almost, which has got a skull in it, in which the game tells you is called the Memento Mortem. Which it says means remember death. It's a bit like Memento Mori, but I don't know why they've decided to go Memento Mortem. Anyway, you chuck that in your pocket. I'll tell you what that's for in a second. The other thing you get is a kind of journal, I would say, and the game makes you flick through it, and there's a little foreword or note at the beginning from a chap called Henry Evans, who says that he has filled out some of this journal for you, but not all of it, and it's your task to fill it in for him. And then you flick through it, and there's some other things in there. There is a crew and passenger manifest. So that's a list of everyone who was on board when the ship set sail. It gives you their names. It gives you their position on the ship, like captain, first mate, and so on. Or it just says passenger if there's a passenger. And it says their sort of country of origin. There are a couple of pictures of life on board the ship. These are like etchings that have been, or whatever, they're in an etching style, like they've been printed in a book, and sort of old style book, that have been drawn by the ship's artist. And within these pictures, everyone on board is... There's like 3 pictures, and everyone on board is depicted in at least one of these pictures. There's also some other stuff. There's like a schematic of the ship that shows you all the decks and what the various compartments and so on are. There's a glossary of a handful of nautical terms in case you don't know what a bosun is and things like that. And there's all these chapters that, as I said, were blank. They have names, but you flick through them, there's nothing on. It's just like blank pages, and you flick through to the end. This book is central to the gameplay experience, because what you're going to be doing is filling in these chapters, and we do see this in other games from time to time. But it's the book itself, those the crew and passenger list, the photographs, they are like key, and you're going to be looking at these a lot. So you've got this new stuff, so you go back onto the ship, wander around. You're going to go to the sort of skeleton that's on board, because it's the only really interesting thing there. And your little watch, your memento mori, will pop up, and the hands will start spinning wildly, and you'll push the button, and the key sort of gameplay mechanic kicks in. So you get a little bit of music, and it'll come up, and it'll show you a chapter name and a part. So it'll say like Chapter 7, Part 4. And the first thing you're going to be doing is you're going to be listening, because what you're going to hear are like maybe some voices, some noises. It's just a black screen. It puts up the subtitles for you, but you can't see anything, so you just listen very carefully, and it's pretty brief. It's just like a few seconds or so. And then once that's finished, you're put into a sort of frozen scene. And this will be a scene from the journey of the ship, and it's the point at which the person whose skeleton you have activated with your weird pocket watch, it's the point at which they died. Right. And you're free to wander around. You know, it's in first person, remember, so you can go around, you can look at what's happened to them, you can see how they've died maybe, but you can see who else is there. You'll be able, if you were hearing voices, you'll see some of the people who were saying the things you just heard, but you don't know exactly who said what. Certainly not at the start of the game, you don't. And then it takes you back to the book, and it pencils in the chapter and part that I've talked about, a little bit of information, and it shows you a little picture of the person who's died. It's their portrait from the aforementioned, they're not photographs, I probably will call them photographs, but they're aforementioned pictures that are in the book. And it is now your task to fill in who they are, their name, and how they expired. And that's what you do in this game. So you're going to be just penciling it in. You might have no idea, but maybe you'll be able to see how they died, at least. Maybe like the first ones are pretty obvious. You can see that they've been, I don't know if they've been shot in the face with a cannonball. That's what you'll see. So you put that in, but it's like a big long list. There's all sorts of things in the lists for the causes of death, and so that you can't just guess for later ones. And there's like red herrings and things in there, and then once you've sort of finished doing that, the game kicks you back out into the ship, and there's a mechanic for leading you on. Like initially I said you can't get below decks, but there's this kind of mechanic for leading you on to finding other corpses, I guess, and seeing their last moments. And that is the game. What you want to do is try and fill in the book, and it does this. Initially you'll be penciling it in, but once you get 3 correct, the game will let you know, and it will write them in ink, if you like, into the book. You don't have to get all 60 in one go. That would be a tremendous feat in order to achieve that. So that's how you progress. That is the game, and it's basically a game of deduction, because what you're using to figure out who these people are and how they died are the book, the information in the book, and like clues. And the clues can be something simple, like in the little bit of dialogue that you hear, they might say the person's name. Somebody might say someone else's name in these little dialogue fragments, or address them by their rank on the ship. They might say captain. That happens about 5 times. They're not
5 captains.
There's about 5 instances of where it's that straightforward. No, you have to use a lot more than that. You have to look at the people. You start looking at what they're wearing. What hats? Hats are super important. Like you look at what hat they've got on. Like this is what I'm talking about. Like kind of spoilers. Straight away, you're gonna initially you won't do this, but once you figure out what's going on, you might go back and look at the pictures, and you're like, well, look, I can kind of see. I think this person's probably the captain, based on this picture, what they're wearing, where they're standing, their kind of body position. Like, because one of the pictures is a sort of formal scene. Like, one of them is like people having a bit of a party on deck, and the other one is I won't say what it is, but it's a slightly more formal affair. So, like, the officers of the ship are kind of, they're all there, and you know, I mean, this is what I'm talking about. Spoilers. Like, they have hats on. Like, you're going to figure this out. Like, the guys with the hats on, they're probably right. And then you start looking beyond this at, like, again in this picture or in the freeze frames, like, just who's standing next to other people, like, because you can start to, like, make inferences about the relationships between these people. And then you've got other things like the languages people speak. I mean, you get that from their accents as well. That's quite a lot of it. There's a lot of listening to accents in this game. I should point out, at no point do you pick up any items. You never find, like, a journal or anything like that. There's no inventory. It's purely based on kind of what I've described to you already. And that's kind of the game. You work your way through all these chapters. And if you're like me, you'll get, like, to the end and you'll have about half done. So you have half that you need to sort of, it depends how good you are at these things and how diligent you are at sort of paying attention to stuff.
How do you know that you're approaching the end, or that you've approached the end? It doesn't sound like the game has any sort of...
Well, you'll fill in the entirety of the book, bar one chapter. And what the note at the beginning of the book says is, in order to find out what happens in this well, it's not the final chapter, but in this sort of pivotal chapter to the story of the ship, you need to have deduced the fates of the entire crew. And then you will basically gain access to this chapter, and that's the sort of true... There's sort of two endings. You can go through to the ending without finding out what happened to everybody, and then it sort of takes you to a sort of bad ending, if you like. But you can continue from that. You can sort of rewind and get back on the ship and keep going at it until you've got everybody. It's a really cool computer game. I've played puzzles a little bit like this, but never in this exact way. There's all sorts of interesting things about it, like unintentional racism.
That's always cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not from
this cool?
Not from the game, from myself. When I start,
because you're doing racial profiling.
This is worse.
Well, this is a part of the game. Is like in the manifest, it shows you where each person is from. That's part of deducing who these people are. But at times, you sort of find yourself, like, looking at the photograph and going, right, which of these people looks the most Chinese? Sort of
oh my god, of course.
But that, or like, you know, that guy's drinking. Maybe those guys are drinking. Maybe they're the Russians or something like this.
Right. Okay. I get you.
But that genuinely is part of, like, you know, like, there are, you know, you look at the way people are dressed, because this is part of, and like, just their facial features a little bit. The way they're dressed is more of it, and where they are in the photographs as well. The pictures. But I mean, that is a part of it, and you do need to know. You need to have a slight ear for accents. I've heard people complain about this. I think being here in the UK, we're sort of right in the middle, so we're not too bad. We hear, like, quite a wide range of accents. But,
yeah.
Like, there are, like, some Scottish people, and, like, if all you've ever heard is Shrek, like, or whatever he's called, the guy, fat bastard, you may not pick up on some of the things that are meant to be a Scottish accent, because they're not always talking. Sometimes it's somebody just going like but in an accent.
Is that someone dying, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, like, sort of slight spoiler, it doesn't really end well for everybody on the ship, but you probably figured
Well,
that out.
I think we guessed this.
Yeah, there's all
It's a
sorts of
ship
other
full of corpses.
Yeah, I mean, the ship itself is a big part of the game. You get to explore it. It's not huge, but it's really interesting to see the ship, to go to the different decks. And I don't know if it's super authentic, but it's kind of, it seems authentic. It seems to tie in with the game, with, you've got different cabins for different people, and it's just interesting to see these things. And there's all the cool creaking noises while you're down below, and the music's cool. Again, I don't think the music is period correct, but it's sort of I just like it. It's sort of like this kind of jaunty, light orchestral music that sounds vaguely nautical without being like overly cheesy. It's pretty good. And one thing, this is a sort of, again, a mild-ish spoiler, but maybe a little bit more, but again, not a solution to any puzzle. But the one thing I really, really liked is one of the scenes, that you investigate, is the point at which the ship's artist, is drawing one of the pictures. And that's so cool. Basically, this picture that you've been staring at for ages, now you're actually there. And what I love about it is that you can see all the people there who are in the picture, but they're not in exactly the place they are in the picture. Like in real life, they were standing in slightly different places, and it's a really neat, amazing attention, or an amazing like point of detail. Where
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's like going, well, okay, the artist has recomposed this picture slightly to make it a better picture, because like so and so was there, but they're kind of like crouching down or looking the wrong way or stuff like that. It's full of cool things like that, and it won a ton of awards, nominated for many at the BAFTAs. It was nominated for Best Game. Didn't win that, but it won Design or something, or Innovation, I can't remember. And I can kind of see why. Because
it certainly sounds very unique, and I must say, I think I'll pick it up because it really sounds quite nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
Even if you've spoiled half of it for all of us now.
The thing is, it's like a puzzle, and it's a deduction puzzle, which maybe you've played games or puzzles where you sort of do things by a process of elimination. But what I love about it is that it involves so much like inference, if you see what I mean. Like looking at things and almost guessing, or like coming up with ideas. Like,
it just sounds very sort of less formulaic than puzzles normally are in video games.
Yeah, because you're looking. It's like looking at an old photograph, and you're like thinking like maybe this is who this person is, and this is what they're about, and that's why they are where that's why they're doing what they're doing, or why they look the way they do, or why they're wearing the things that they're wearing. Yeah, good game, and a little bit of a change of pace, I would say. I really enjoyed it.
So if you're playing an agent of an insurance company, what's the bad ending in this game? Does it mean that your insurance company has to pay off a lot of money?
Well, I think they actually pay less. I can't remember. I didn't pay super amount of attention to it. It does this slightly odd thing at the end where it shows you the report for the ship, and for each person whose fate you've deduced, there's like an insurance payout. It's a little bit of detail. It's quite a curious little addition to the game. I mean, there's some real niggly, annoying things about it as well, which I won't go into, but there are a few like sort of gameplay irritations, but it's not enough to make you not want to play the game or not continue with it. Definitely worth checking out.
How long do you figure is it?
Right, it's totally like how long to play through.
Yeah, roughly.
It's really going to vary on how smart you are and how willing you are to sort of spend time and pay attention to what's going on. I kind of rushed through it initially a little bit, which meant I then had to, and then I took a break. So it meant I then had to go back and like go through a lot of the stuff I'd already seen and spend more time looking at it. Don't do that, because it was really annoying.
Don't be like Dave.
Yeah, it's not a long game. So when you're at each scene, take your time, have a look around. There's other stuff you might see that might be helpful. You see what I mean? Don't want to stress it too much, but you're looking at someone die. But have a look about. You can move around a limited distance from where the sort of death took place, and that's intentional because there's other stuff that will provide clues, and that's a better way to do it than you can do a slightly weird thing in this where you can cheat slightly because of the three guesses correctly, and it tells you that you've got it right. You can sort of exploit that if you wanted to, and it's sort of part of the game wants you to, but I used that way more than was necessary. I found out later on as I played it more, I would find clues, and I was like, oh yeah, I've already found out who this person is, but now I see there's like a clue there that I'd forgotten about that actually made it way more obvious than my sort of weird brute force method that I used for a few of them.
All right.
You don't have to, because I was curious. This is why I wanted to finish it, because I was curious whether like brute forcing it by if you've got two that are right, you can kind of use that, you kind of abuse that to get a third one that's really difficult. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you can like put in, you've got two that are right, and then you can start putting in guesses for like if you're unsure about who it is, but you've got a vague idea, you can just cycle through like, and eventually it'll go, oh, you've got that one right. The game wants you to do that a little bit, but you don't need to use that too much. The clues are there, and finding them is satisfying. So do it that way.
Right, cool. Right, we really do need to move on.
Yeah.
So that's Lucas Pope.
Yes.
And it came out, was that October last year?
October 2018, Lucas Pope. And it's for Windows and macOS.
Excellent. I'm like Pawel. I'm really considering picking it up. I mean, I really considered picking it up back when it came out because it looked amazing. It looked exactly like my kind of game. So I still might do.
It really does sound interesting. I might do that as well.
Right, cool. Anyway, let's move on. Pawel, you're going to go next. What little Steam gem have you found?
Hello, I've found a couple actually, because in all fairness, over the past 2 weeks, all I've been doing really was waiting for a Plague Tale, which I've actually still not played. So in the meantime, I've downloaded loads of stuff really, things like Deck of Ashes and Lovecraft's Untold Stories and What Tastes Like Wine, all sorts of things, Chaos Reborn, and I've put a couple of hours into each of those. But the two games, and I'm going to start talking about the first one of those that kept me for longer, were Trials of Fire and then War of Omens. But let's start with Trials of Fire, which is actually a board game, even though obviously not a board game. I played it on Steam. It's designed to be a board game or to feel like a board game. All the mechanics you would expect from a board game are here, and to be fair, in most of the time when you play it, even the graphics are there to simulate a board game.
So like Armello, a little bit, or
I suppose. I mean, the concept is different. This is I think a roguelite, you would call it. It's a single-player, turn-based. Well, it's got two modes. You have your sort of campaign map mode, where your party moves through the world from, I suppose, I mean, the map itself is showing us just a lot of hexes. It's a randomly generated some sort of post-apocalyptic fantasy world with glassy deserts and everybody's suffering and dying of hunger, and it's very, very hot as well. And general misery all around, and you're these underprivileged survivors of the apocalypse who are trying, I suppose, to help your whatever community. So you set out on a quest by essentially you leave your community behind. So this is the best way to help them, I'm sure. And you start picking up various exclamation marks, which is what you would do in just about any fantasy adventure.
Classic.
And some of these question marks essentially are just, a single page of reading through a decently written short, and I think sometimes, it's, let's say, pre-generated sort of mini quests where you can actually make some choices. Probably important to mention this, that quite often these choices are not what you would expect to be morally predictable in most fantasy games. The setting of Trials of Fire is quite unforgiving, and you will often find that the game rewards you for, I don't know, encountering slavers dragging some sort of slaves to whatever pits, and just maybe buying a slave from them, or maybe not rescuing them, rather than sacrificing your resources and your health trying to help them, because the game is quite merciful, and if you fight badly, you're just gone and you have to start from the beginning again. This is a roguelite, so if you die, you do die. But just going back to the presentation, because I feel that it's one of the most sort of standout aspects of the game. When you're in your sort of campaign mode, where your party moves across the map, it really just looks like paper cut out in a standee, just moving from hex to hex. Once you arrive at an encounter and you go to the main, let's say, mode of the game, you again have a hexagon map where your characters become round tokens. They tossed on the map and then they just start moving around. So again, board game, but really well designed. The combat itself is very tactical. The roles each of your character will have in that combat are very well defined. You know how sometimes you can have your rogue, you can have your, I don't know, ranger, mage, or tank, and there's barely differences between them. In Trials of Fire, I should mention that this is an early access. So at the moment, out of 8 characters, the developers aim to make available for the player, there is only 4 that you can have in early access, and I think you start with 3, and as you progress, you'll hopefully be able to unlock the 4th one, and then more will be made available later. So at the moment, you can have an archer or a rogue or whatever you call him, a warrior, and a mage. And I can say that your warrior really tanks in this game. You can see how this class's abilities are designed to withstand damage, to protect allies better than in most games I've seen. Your ranger is an absolute DPS, able to do shitloads in combat. Your mage, I've played this game 3 times. I don't think I've ever once used her successfully. She's just standing at the back, and that's that.
Well, why? Why so?
Because mages are useless, and also because she's both fragile and her skills are, I suppose, aimed at crowd control, whereas I'm getting killed by this game long before I get into any crowded situations. It gets difficult really fast. But sorry, just going back to the mechanics. So once you're in the main mode, which is let's say the battle mode with your tokens moving around and battling with other tokens, it's a card game. Each of your character will draw 3 cards of their own respective deck, and decks are very specialized. So again, you have your deck for the warrior will have quite a lot of tanky abilities, whereas your, I don't know, deck for your mage will have a lot of area of effect spells. Yeah. And as you keep drawing these cards or upgrading those cards, when your characters level up, you can replace some of your cards with stronger cards, and to be fair, that's that. But even if it might sound simplistic, it's just very well balanced. Apart from the fact that I have no idea how to use the mage successfully, there are simple design choices that really make this fighting system or this card game system work. Because I'll give you an example. So, because the key mechanic here is that using most of these cards cost you mana, but you don't have any. Like the generic pool of mana for everything. So in order to gain mana, you have to discard some of the cards. Each discarded card gives you, say, gives you 1 mana. Yeah, most of your cards will cost, say, 2 points of mana. So at every turn, you're making strategic choices. Which of these cards you will, in fact, need during your turn, which you can dispose of in order to actually, generate mana in order to then pay for the cards that you want to use. And the cards will allow you to move, the cards will allow you to attack, the cards will let you, bring your enemies closer to you, put some additional armor on you and stuff like this. And this is the gist of it. With equipment come additional cards, with various status effects come additional cards, some of them negative. You will sometimes have cards in your deck that are wasting your time or your space in deck simply because in the campaign map you've not rested for a long time and your party is exhausted. You can draw an exhaustion card, for example, instead of a useful card.
Sorry, I have a question. So is it purely a card game when it comes to combat, or is there any moving tokens around on a map or anything?
The tokens do move. You look at a hexagon map with randomly generated obstacles. There is line of sight, distances, range of spells and attacks. Everything is there. Some of your cards will allow you to move. If you decide to discard a card that generates a point of mana, you can use a single point of mana to move your character by, I think, 2 hexagons. If you're lacking proper move cards, because your actual move card, I think it's called an advanced card, lets you move 4 spaces, yeah? But you can always move a little bit. So yeah, it's a really nice tactical system. It's very rewarding. It feels like, you're being rewarded for good tactics, for smart thinking during fighting. At the beginning, those battles, probably intentionally, are satisfyingly easy. You feel like, you're just bossing it. But you know what? I think, I'm not sure, but I think that the difficulty level then goes up whenever the 3 of your characters level up, because you can. Whenever you go through a combat, whatever situation, one of your characters can get leveled up, and then it cannot level up again until the remaining 2 level up. Once all 3 leveled up, then you see an immediate increase in the difficulty of fights that you encounter in the world. And soon enough, those really become hard. And even though your decks would have by then also been improved, this is a roguelite, and I suppose one of the aspects of roguelike games is that you have to lose eventually, and probably sooner than you think you would, and then you get some form of unlock once you get your game over situation and you restart from scratch. Which is what I've done a few times now, and I keep coming back. So it is a really fun game, and I'm looking forward to more, and maybe to actually learning how to survive this game in a long process. Because even when you think you know how to fight your battles, or you develop your decks to support a particular gameplay style and tactics that you came up with, you will be punished for sometimes even bad luck in the procedurally generated world, because this game also tracks your amount of your money or health, whatever, but also your food, and your characters really go hungry quite quickly. You can die out of hunger, or you will have a lot of cards in your deck responsible for your hunger. You don't heal up well enough. Soon enough, it's all just miserable, and you can feel that all your characters are encumbered in combat because each deck for each respective characters is also showing their physical condition. So a really nice hybrid, I suppose, of a board game and a card game.
Yeah, this sounds pretty cool.
That's interesting, the food mechanic, because I think we've seen sort of deck builders where wounds or getting hurt, or there's usually one sort of mechanic that either adds duff cards to your deck or like disables you some other way. But to have multiple ones,
I'm not saying that you're getting multiple straight away. I'm just saying that there's multiple different things that can happen to you. You're going to have various events on your campaign map that will say, oh, you've made this particular choice, you've saved somebody from, I don't know, a chasm where they were supposed to fall, but instead you've slipped and you've broken your leg, and suddenly you get a broken leg card in your deck that is permanently doing something. You can use there is a rest action in the campaign map where you can choose to heal up your hit points a little bit if you have food, or you can, instead of healing up, you can craft things if you have crafting materials, or a different action during rest is attempting to heal an injury in this particular case. Every rest, no matter which rest action you take, will always regenerate your stamina as such. But every time, no matter what you do, whether you travel or whether you rest, you're using up your food resource. And this is one of the biggest challenges in this game. I find it that even if I find shops here and there in this post-apocalyptic world, or if I steal food from people that probably need it more than I do, I still always suffer from hunger sooner than I thought I would. This is probably the biggest challenge there at the moment.
The Hand of Fate video game did this as well with the food mechanic. Where,
I think Hand of Fate is actually similar to this.
Food. Yeah, I was going to say, it does sound quite similar, but I mean, Hand of Fate did a sort of 3D action combat thing, whereas obviously the combat and what you're describing sounds completely different. But I mean, it seems to be a thing like over the past few years that using cards as a mechanic in video games seems to be a thing that's happening. I mean, Slay the Spire, for example, that's really popular, and that's just basically a card game.
Also,
if I can say anything about Trials of Fire, I'm going to say that I don't want to compare those, but I'm going to art in Trials of Fire really nice, very nice to look at. All the cards are really well designed. They have their own sort of little, I suppose, scheme in the way all the cards are designed and how they present various actions. All the characters, all the monsters you encounter, they have good artists. It's a team of 2 people plus, I suppose, various artists they've commissioned, but so far, excellent effort.
Cool. Okay, right. We do have to move on.
yeah.
We are running out of time, and we've got a couple of other things to squeeze in. So that's Trials of Fire. Who's that by?
It's by What Boy Games, which is essentially 2 guys. It's been released on Steam so far, just a couple of months ago.
Excellent, right. Well, before you talk about War of Omens, I'm gonna squeeze myself in here because I picked up my PlayStation VR again. I've had a few games sitting on my PlayStation for a while that are VR games that I just haven't had a chance to play. I mean, you have to kind of commit yourself to VR games because you're kind of shutting yourself off from the world, so you need to be sure that you've got the time to do that. But I played from start to finish Statik, Institute of Retention, which is a creepy sounding name.
Title.
Oh yeah. I mean, how does that make you feel when you hear that? The Statik Institute of Retention. What does that conjure up in your head?
I mean, the word retention has a vaguely school system-like feel to it.
Just makes me think of water retention.
You would, though, you nerd. So this game, what I will say about this, okay, is that they know what they were doing when they made this, because this is like, I think this might be maybe not, but it is definitely like a PSVR game. I'm not sure if it was ever like released on any other system, but like it's perfectly suited for the PlayStation VR, and it feels like they've made it for it because it kind of uses the limitations of like PlayStation VR, in that you're just sat in a chair, and your hands are inside a box, which is a puzzle box, and you're sort of gripping your PlayStation controller, and it kind of starts to feel sort of natural. You're just like, you can't see your hands because they're inside a box, but it feels like because you're pressing buttons and you're clearly doing things inside this box as well to manipulate stuff. It's pretty cool the way they've done that. Like, because that's the kind, like, because with PlayStation VR you can't move or anything, you can't like walk around the room, and if you've only got the controller, obviously you've got more freedom with the Move controller, but if you've only got the controller, which is what this game uses, then yeah, it's perfectly suited. So in this game, you start the game and you kind of wake up inside what looks like some sort of weird laboratory. There's a man with a white coat whose face is blurred, which in itself is extremely creepy, because you can never see this guy's face. And there is a point in the game where you can see your own face as well, and that's also blurred. So I don't know what's going on there. But clearly you're the subject of some sort of experiment. It's never really clearly stated what sort of world that you live in here. Is this an experiment you signed up for? Is this like, are you being kidnapped and forced into this? It's never explained. You know, it's one of these games that just leaves it open to you. But this scientist just starts saying really strange things, and you don't really follow what he's actually saying, because it's all just very vague and, again, just slightly scary. And he doesn't really explain to you what you're supposed to do. You've just got a box. It may have various things on it. You guys, have you played Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes?
Yes.
Yes. So
I'm familiar with it from your review.
yeah, so there's something similar to that, because Keep Talking Nobody Explodes has that. You've got a bomb which has various little puzzle things on it, and you have to kind of solve the puzzles. And this is the same. You've got this box that your hands are inside, and you can manipulate it using the buttons in the PlayStation controller. Like, there's a number of different levels. Obviously, each level's a different box, so the puzzles differ from one level to the other. But it can just be a case of, like, you know, you have to kind of figure out what each part of the PlayStation controller does in each particular box. So like, you just sort of sit and fiddle around with it for a while and press buttons and then see what moves on the side of the box. And
yeah, well, I was going to ask why I didn't use the wands, but I kind of get it now, I think.
Yeah, it's because they are trying to make it feel like your hands are stuck. And you can't really do anything. So this is what I mean when I say like about the limitations of PSVR and using a controller. I mean, it just really plays up to that. So yeah, you will do these various things until you have solved every puzzle on the box. And then the scientist will, like, you know, say something creepy, and then a needle that's kind of been stuck in your arm the whole time will then inject some fluid into you, and you black out again.
Oh, excellent.
And then you might wake up in a different room. But in between the levels is quite interesting, because you seem to be in this sort of weird, like, it's almost like like a sort of 80s cyberspace style thing, or maybe it's something weird. It's almost like you're kind of floating in a place, and there's lots of sort of like cables all over the place.
Not like Johnny Mnemonic.
Cables. No, I mean, if you're talking about the film, I switched off Johnny Mnemonic after 10 minutes because the acting was so bad.
Excuse me, we're talking about one of the most important masterpieces of cyberpunk genre.
Yeah, you're talking about the book.
I mean, show some respect, man. We're talking about
if you're
Johnny
talking about
Mnemonic.
the book, fair enough, but I only watched the film. And like I say, like Keanu Reeves, I was cringing watching this. I just couldn't watch it anymore.
I mean, the amount of cheese in it is spectacular, but come on, it's Johnny Mnemonic.
Fromage. So yeah, sorry, I've kind of thrown myself off a bit there. Yeah, the game is like, when you're in this like in between sort of space, there's like a weird sort of hologram thing in front of you, and you can like match up these little hologram pieces to make something like a shape, and it's almost like a sort of Tetris shape almost. And then when you make the right shape, it becomes solid, and then you can move it. And then you kind of realise that in between each level, you're starting to try and form a cube out of these. And it's the only way to like sort of get onto the last level of the game is to then form this cube properly. So there's almost like every time you go back into this sort of weird cyberspace area, the bits that you've already made are still floating where you left them. And you can just make another shape and then try and put them together until you form this cube. And then you get on to the last level of the game. I'm not going to say what happens at the last level of the game, other than that I nearly shit myself. It does. I mean, spoiler alert, but it does have a jump scare, and
VR seems to be.
I mean, it is well suited for it, Pawel. I mean, I think it's getting overplayed a bit, but you know, yeah, I was not expecting it in this game though. I have to say. And it's the way they do it as well. Actually, once it happens, you're kind of like, oh, that was actually pretty cool. But it's quite interesting because like it's almost like you're being experimented on to see how you react to your surroundings and stuff as well. So like some of the clues for some of the puzzles are very subtle clues in the rooms themselves, and you'll get moved from room to room. There seems to be like a lab area, but then in one or two of the levels, you're actually in like a canteen. Still strapped to your chair, still with a new box in your hands, and some of the clues are actually in the canteen itself. So it's pretty cool the way it does that. There is one other puzzle. In fact, most of this entire box is based on this, where like you're a little robot disc thing that's inside a vent, and you can flip up a screen on your little box, and you can see things from the point of view of that little robot disc on wheels, and you can just control it. And actually what you have to do is go around the Institute and find the different clues in the Institute. But it's pretty cool because the little screen's on top of the box, and you have to like hold it up to your face so that you can see where you're driving this thing. I really enjoyed that bit. That was actually really cool. The other thing, there's like happy... if you click in like the L3 and R3, so you click in the sticks, a little happy face appears or a little sad face appears in your box, depending on which one you pressed. And sometimes the scientist will react to that. So if you just keep doing happy faces, he's like, yes, excellent. But you keep doing sad faces, and he's like, oh, don't worry. Like, there's other bits like in between some of the levels as well, other than the sort of cyberspace thing, where like there's almost like a sort of picture association thing goes on, where you're sitting in front of a projector screen, and he just kind of shows you like these weird as fuck pictures. Like some of them are very normal, like a sort of kind of stick man thing holding a briefcase, and you have to press the happy or sad button to react to it.
Okay.
But then some of them just get really, really strange. Like sometimes it's just weirdly just like blurry and like half of the picture's missing and stuff like that. Just and there seems to be absolutely no game reason for these things. Like for these levels with the projector thing. I don't think it makes any difference what you actually choose. You just have to go through the process. But it's just part of it's just part of setting up the whole like creepiness of the whole thing. It's just being a sort of lab experiment. And like the whole time this scientist is just being weird as fuck, and I still like I came out the other end of the game having no idea what had happened. But the puzzles were, I mean, I didn't have any major problems with any of the puzzles. I think maybe one of them took me a wee bit longer than the others. They were reasonably straightforward. Once you sort of realised what you had to do, you kind of just could sit and play with it and figure it out eventually. So I didn't really have too many issues with it. I wouldn't say it's a particularly difficult puzzle game, but the creepiness of it, and this, you know, just the whole aesthetic of it and everything was pretty cool. And I would say that it's worth picking up.
It sounds kind of fun. Is it?
Oh yeah, definitely.
How much is it? Can you remember? Or
I can probably find out if you just...
Yeah, I mean, I know how it is. You you do tend to
Do
forget.
you think that would play reasonably well without VR?
Well, no, because I think part of the game is having your hands stuck.
Yeah.
If you see what I mean, just like having, like feeling like that you're stuck in that body, essentially, is part of the appeal of it, I think. At the moment, actually, right this second, it is on sale on the PlayStation Store. So its normal price is $15.99. It is £6.49 right now.
Yeah, but we're recording this on a Friday.
Yeah, well, so it probably won't be by the time it goes out. But yeah, so it's like 16 quid.
Fair enough.
But it's definitely it's definitely interesting. So yes, that is the Statik Institute of Retention. I think that's a couple of years old now. I think that came out in 2017. I'm actually finding it hard to get that information, but it's by Tarsier Studios.
Well, it's impressive that you've put your helmet back on, because I thought this was mostly gathering dust by like nowadays.
Oh, I still jump into Skyrim every so often and just to watch the glitches happen. Skyrim glitches in VR are hilarious. Okay, right. Pawel, we've probably got time for you to talk about your other game, War of Omens.
Yeah, War of Omens. Because I'll be quick with this one. It's a small game, to be fair. It's one of those free of charge online sort of card games with all the trappings you would expect from them. Where
Is it a free to play game?
Well,
This is right up Dave Street.
Is this what you're saying, Pawel?
Well, it's when I say free to play, that obviously means that once you start doing this, you'll probably encounter some form of paywalls and stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly what free to play means. In this weird world we live in.
Card games. I've been sort of tinkering with various card games ever since I've reheated that particular interest of mine when I was playing Gwent. So this one is a bit, well, not AAA by any means, but in its own way quite a fun experience. One of the reasons probably is because it's reasonably fast. Each of the, well, let's call them battles, will normally take no more than a couple of minutes, I think. Your deck in War of Omens, I think, only consists of like 9 or 10 cards. When you're actually drawing cards each round, you're mostly drawing cards representing money and using them to generate one of your resources, because your money, ducats, I think they're called. Your ducats is one of your resources, and then you also have resources. I think you've got your food resource, you've got your like skulls resource, you've got your magic resource, possibly others when using the other factions than the default first one that you get in this game. Anyway, my point is, you constantly have cards representing a single coin in your deck, and then occasionally you'll draw random cards that you have to pay for with the money resource in order to field them. So even though I said there's actually 10 unique cards in your deck as such, you can draw multiple instances of this card. I'm not exactly sure what's the algorithm behind it, whether if you have, say, a single mercenary already fielded, is it more difficult, or is it just as easy to draw another mercenary as it is to draw a different kind of ally that you can field and pay for? I'm not entirely sure. There's plenty of mechanics in this game I've not really yet comprehend, but maybe because it seems, at least after playing, I don't know, 20, 30, let's call them battles, it still feels reasonably both swift, fun, and sort of easy, but also difficult to predict. So I suppose as long as my opponent doesn't know what they're doing, and they don't really know because I'm playing against AI, then I can be excused just to dish out whatever cards I draw and have fun with the mechanics. Now in this game, the mechanics seem to be mostly focusing on, I suppose, damage being done to your opponent's cards or the opponent's, I suppose, main health pool. When your turn is over, strange as that sounds, so you field you using money, you pay for various allies that you can then bring up on the board, and then once you've finished your turn, this is where your ally or a number of allies that you have usually do their thing, whether this is attacking or generating additional resources. There isn't that much variety in it, and I suppose the real variety comes from how you combo those cards, which again is what card games are about. So this game is, to be fair, it's quite simple. It's got basic nice sense of identity in terms of art, and also in terms of the semi sort of Renaissance, or slightly after that actually. No, I shouldn't say Renaissance. I'm gonna say sort of pirate era, really, but fantasy-like setting, various factions battling each other. There is some sort of story with a lot of characters. really constantly talking during your battles, because I should probably mention that even though this is a free play and you're supposed to, I'm sure that this is what the developers are counting on, you're supposed to start playing against other players and paying for various booster packs and making your decks bigger and paying money for even better cards and blah blah blah. I obviously picked it up so I can play it free of charge, and because I saw that there is a solo campaign, and the solo campaign has you following this pirate captain who has all sorts of different adventures, and it's an interesting way of storytelling, because you get your, I suppose, just cutscenes, and by that I essentially mean just a couple of written sentences and dialogues with a few drawn just artworks, but then during the actual battles, your opponent and your character such constantly exchange various dialogues as you keep playing with the cards, and whoever wrote this must have really put a lot of thought into political world building of this setting. There's all sorts of bishops and I don't know, bankers and investors and various captains and you name it. It's all very sort of bankery, very backstabbingly. It has its own, again, it has its own style. It's not all, I don't know, orcs bashing skulls and heroic paladins smiting evil. And this thing, most of the time, your actual fighting units will not be warriors, but rather, I don't know, politicians scheming and giving you the skull resource. Or, fair enough, you might have some warriors on the field, some sort of, again, mercenaries or militiamen defending you from enemy agents, but most of your cards, most of the allies you put on the board will not be warriors or monsters or various magical animals, but rather politicians, bankers, and wealthy widows. So that's cool. That's
So this sounds like a kind of spin on. I mean, I'm looking at a picture of it right now, and aesthetically, it looks like sort of Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering, things like that.
Well, because it sounds
like a kind of spin on those.
It seems.
I mean, yeah, it all started from Magic the Gathering, yeah. But all these heavy card games will have huge amounts of cards and really big decks to build. And I think War of Omens mostly attempts to go away from it by having you focus on a smaller, I'm going to say, variety of cards in your deck, which also means that every choice you make is more important.
Well, yeah, because like I'm looking at that, and I mean, I say it looks like sort of like Hearthstone and things, but it looks almost like Hearthstone mixed with like Dominion, the card game.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, you start with a small hand of cards. Is that right, Pawel? Is it 10?
But I mean, even when you unlock more cards, you still only have 10. I'm going to say 10.
10 types of cards.
10 types of card in your deck.
Yeah, because that's very Dominion.
Yeah.
Okay.
And are you doing like any deck building while you play? Like, are you adding cards to your deck as you play the game?
Your deck doesn't get bigger. You can diversify your deck and obviously make it more, I suppose, just make it work better with the strategy that you come up with. But your deck, as far as I'm aware, will always consist of 10 types of cards, plus money.
Okay.
But again, so it seems simple, and to be fair, quite often I find it that I'm using exactly the same mechanic in all my fights, so long as I'm using the same character, which is the case when you're playing solo campaign. I find it that I don't really, I don't know, adjust the way I play depending on which enemy I fight, which is probably not a good thing if you think about it. It might just mean that the game itself is limited in this aspect. But the fights so far are fun and just fast. So it's a lightweight game, but pleasant. I'm looking forward to
playing against real people.
That's
what you were going to say there, wasn't it?
No. Jesus, why would I play against
Because that's what the game is made for.
Think about it. There is AI here that actually counts me and wants me to surround my ships.
Real people will taunt you as well if you let them.
But they will taunt me
more.
out of character. I want some in-character taunting. It's a completely different experience.
You want to be on the RP
so what
server.
You mean is that, so none of the AI players say, lol, noob.
So your interactions with NPCs are always better than any living person, honestly.
It's a sad state of affairs, Pawel.
No, this is the truth. Right, so this is fifth column games, and I mean the single player campaign is again you're just playing as the same character. I suppose it gets more diversified as you go through. Although I've already gone through half the campaign. The game itself has 20 different sort of characters belonging to 4 different factions, and those factions actually, from what I gather, looking at the cards, they do differ quite a lot in terms of strategy and how they use their strengths and weaknesses. So diversity is there. I'm just not exactly sure yet whether there is any sort of diversity in what you can do with the deck that is assigned to your given character. This is particularly easy to spot in the campaign. So if you do play a multi, I would actually wonder. I might actually try it. If you choose to play a multiplayer game here, and you get to see who your opponent is, do you straight away know their strengths and weaknesses and what they can do and what they cannot do? Because obviously, if that's true, then the only real question mark in any multiplayer fight is who you play against and not how they play.
Right.
So yeah, we'll see.
When did that come out, Pawel?
That came out 3 months ago.
Excellent. So it's pretty recent.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, we are going to have to wrap up there. We have gone way over time.
Way.
We're going to talk about something else, but that's not going to happen now, so we'll have to leave it till next time.
Can I mention one thing very quickly?
Yes, of course
PS
you can.
Plus, 2 games this month. Overcooked, the original one, free, which is obviously
Excellent.
You should get that, and Edith Finch as well. So 2 amazing games.
Yeah, what remains of Edith Finch.
Oh,
Yep.
So pick them up if you're on PS Plus. That's it.
Thank you, Dave.
Good shout, Dave. Well done. Okay, right, we will give out all our internet stuff. So if you want to find all our social media stuff now, we will now just be redirecting you to our website, which is firstplayertoken.com. That's FIRST player token. If you want to email us, ask us any questions, anything like that, you can do so at firstplayertoken@gmail.com. But if you really want to find out what we are doing on a day-to-day basis, me and Pawel generally talk a load of crap on Twitter, which is at 1stplayertoken.
That's Once Player Token.
Thank you very much, Dave. And we are part of the Podnose Network.
The UK's leading entertainment podcast network.
And Euan's not here to give us any updates on new shows there. He's our Podnose correspondent. But if you go to podnose.com, you will find a network of podcasts there on a variety of topics that you can enjoy at your pleasure. Okay, we will be back next week, hopefully with a board games episode. Pawel, will we ever see you again?
On a board game episode, you'll definitely see me. My next couple of weeks are looking to be complicated, but I'll do my best to be there. And I've picked up a few board games myself, so I might just have some input. But you guys have already talked about Legends Untold, and I have just put my.
We haven't played it again yet though. We only played it that one time at Tabletop Scotland, so we haven't actually sat and done like any campaign stuff with it or anything yet. So the opportunity's there.
Fantastic!
I'm definitely up for talking about that game again.
Cool.
Okay, well, as I say, we'll probably be back next week. But until then, thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.